police proceeded the grim task of exhuming Marjorie Hutchinson's casket. On that somber day in September, they delicately unearthed the casket. The air heavy with anticipation, the casket was gradually brought to the surface. Every detail was meticulously observed. Every movement was cautiously performed. They were aware that each step was as critical as the evidence it might expose. They brought the casket to the surface, and they took it to a secure location. They opened the casket. As they expected, they found the remains of Marjorie Hutchinson. But that wasn't it. They found something else and had a huge problem on their hands. Hello, strangers and strangelings. Welcome back to the Strange Bar and Grill. I'm serving up another true crime story time. So pull up a chair. If you like strange true crime and storytelling, then this is the place to be. Here with me, JP. So kick back and grab a drink or a snack. Always tip that like button. It helps with the channel. Join that SBG family by subscribing and hitting that notification bell to make sure you're getting notified when I release a weekly video. All right, guys, let's go. This is the story of Mark Joseph Villella, a licensed funeral director and embalmer. Now, before we start, let's take a moment to meet Mark and his wife, Exelee Villella. Mark had made his living dealing with death, preparing bodies for their final rest. He was known to be meticulous and composed, traits often associated with this profession. He was described by most that knew him as charismatic, but some would notice a different side to Mark, a dark side. His wife, Exelee, on the other hand, was a beautiful and caring woman. She was a loving mother and a dedicated wife. Their relationship was like many others. It had its shares of ups and downs. There were reports suggesting that their marriage was filled with tension and that arguments between them were not uncommon. However, to most outsiders, they seemed like any other normal couple, just navigating life and the ups and downs of a marriage. So it was the summer of 1999, and normally a very quiet and relaxed vibe would be in this town of DeBary, Florida. But it would change when Exelee disappeared without a trace. This vibrant, caring woman was just suddenly gone, and her absence was felt deeply within the close-knit community. Mark reported his wife's disappearance, claiming they had a heated argument at home, and she just got up and just walked off and went to her sister's house. And also, according to Mark, she had stormed out of the house on that night in August, and she didn't return home. She left behind her car, her personal belongings, and most notably, their young son. Mark said that their tiny argument had escalated, and that had led Exelee to leave looking for some space to kind of clear her head, But to those who knew her, especially as this devoted mother, the idea of her leaving behind her young child for an extended period of time just seemed a little out of character. The inconsistencies between Exelee's known behavior and the circumstances of her disappearance, of course, according to her husband, raised some eyebrows. Furthermore, there was no evidence to suggest that she had planned on leaving at all. All of her personal items were there. Her car remained at the home. There were no significant withdrawals from her bank accounts. So to the authorities, Mark's account of Exelee's sudden departure began to appear less like a wife taking a break after an argument and more like a crafted story designed to kind of explain someone's abrupt absence. Sounds like you lying. Why you always lying? But with no signs of her and the inconsistencies in Mark's story, the investigation had begun to shift and the spotlight started to turn onto Mark himself. As the investigation progressed, investigators noticed inconsistencies in Mark's statements. He was unable to provide a clear and consistent timeline of events leading up to Exelee's disappearance. And again, these inconsistencies, coupled with the mounting circumstantial evidence, started to paint Mark not as a worried husband, but as a suspect in his wife's disappearance. Because it's always the spouse, right? Another thing that further raised investigators' suspicions was Mark's personal life post Exelee's disappearance. Surprisingly, Mark began a romantic relationship with a new woman shortly after his wife went missing. While that's not, of course, a definitive sign of guilt, scratch that. That's a sign of guilt. Mark's and we'll try to keep it YouTube safe here. An H to the Izzo. In other words, a noise that Santa makes, a noise that rhymes with ho. Mark, you're a hoe. Sorry, YouTube gods. Mark's a hoe. Anyway, back to the story. His actions were seen as unusual for a man whose wife was supposedly just missing. If your wife's just missing, why are you going out on dates? You're not concerned your wife's missing? It's because you know where she's at. Back to the story. It wasn't long before police began to connect the dots at the time of her disappearance. But here's where it gets weird. Around the time that Exelee went missing, Mark had arranged and overseen a funeral for an 89-year-old woman named Marjorie Hutchinson, and it was a closed casket service. A detail that would later raise some suspicions and questions by investigators. What's that thing Arsenio used to say? Things that make you go, The police theorized that Mark had exploited the situation to hide Exelee's body in a shocking act of evil. Authorities believed that Mark had placed Exelee's body in the same casket as, you guessed it, Marjorie Hutchinson, and then had them buried together. If this is true, this horrible act would turn the final resting place of a person who is innocent of all crimes basically into a crime scene itself, and the sacred act of burial into a means of concealing a murder. Mark, you going to hell. Can you imagine being that family and you just get this phone call and it's like, hey, we're the police. We have reason to believe that your loved one's casket is a part of a crime scene and we're going to have to do some digging. And there might be another person lying on top of them, below them, to the side of them. We're not sure, but we're going to have to dig up your mother, your grandmother, your friend, your sister. But backed with a court order, the police proceeded the grim task of exhuming Marjorie Hutchinson's casket. And of course, this process was handled with the utmost care and reverence, conducted by a team of forensic experts and seasoned investigators who understood the weight of their duty. And on that somber day in September, they delicately unearthed the casket, and the casket was brought to the surface. They observed every detail meticulously. Every movement was cautiously performed. They were aware that each step was as critical as the evidence it might expose. So they get the casket to the surface and they take it to a secure location and they open the casket, and as expected, they found the remains of Marjorie Hutchinson. But there was also a second body, Exelee Villella. Their hypothesis, as shocking as it was, had proven to be accurate. You're probably asking yourselves, how did they know? How did they know Exelee's body was in Marjorie's grave? And the answer to that is, it was the timing of Marjorie's funeral. It was a closed casket affair, and around the time of Marjorie's funeral was around the time that Exelee went missing. So yes, the investigators' hypothesis was correct. Exelee's body was concealed within the same casket as Marjorie, and this act left even the most seasoned investigators just absolutely stunned. So this tragedy of Exelee's disappearance had just changed and morphed into this, not only a murder case, but just this story of wild desecration of this poor Marjorie Hutchinson's grave and this crazy deception. So Mark, in killing Exelee, affected Exelee's family, and then also affected Marjorie Hutchinson's family. But I guess if you're willing to kill someone, just popping their body in a casket with another body, this isn't really a big deal, right? I mean, Mark deals with dead people all the time. He kills his wife and he's like, hey, let's just pop her in the casket with another dead woman, and who cares? Just bury her and I get away. But you didn't get away, Mark. You did not get away. And again, the fact that Mark had access to all these things to basically make this happen, to be able to hide a body in with another body and get it buried, it's not that surprising that investigators started to kind of look at this as a possibility, knowing Mark's profession. And they probably just said, hey, let's see if we had any closed casket funerals. around the same time and start from there. But the discovery of her body marked just the beginning of a new phase in this case. The medical examiners performed an autopsy to try to piece together the circumstances of Exelee's death, and the medical examiner determined that Exelee had been the victim of a violent attack, suffering fatal stab wounds in her back. The report indicated that the stab wounds were inflicted with a significant amount of force, severing one of Exelee's ribs. In fact, this finding, of course, suggests a level of anger and intent that's consistent more with a personal attack, as opposed to just some sort of, random attack. It also sadly revealed that Exelee was pregnant at the time of her death. So the combination of these findings, along with, the circumstances surrounding Exelee's disappearance and the subsequent discovery of her body pointed to Mark. With all his inconsistent stories and his quick start to a new relationship, and of course all the actual evidence and the timing of Marjorie Hutchinson's funeral, it all just added up to be Mark. All the fingers are pointing at Mark. So, which leads to, what is his motive? Was it because his wife was pregnant? He had a new girlfriend that he wanted to be with? It's unclear what the exact motive was, but I believe it was a combination of all of those things. But the one thing he did say to authorities was that he wanted a divorce, but he didn't want to pay for it. But you're paying for it now, you dumbass. But if you add it all up, he basically had a new relationship going. He wanted out of it. His wife was pregnant. He probably didn't want a divorce. He probably didn't want to pay child support for this baby on the way. And so he got rid of her. Mark was arrested on October 1st, 1999. He was charged with first-degree murder in what now became a very morbid tale of love, betrayal, and a disturbing misuse of trust. His trial began later in the year 2000. Mark was ultimately found guilty, and this isn't a shocker because with all the evidence, inconsistent stories, his wife's body was found in a grave with another woman. So what do you guys think? Mark murdered Exelee, put her in Marjorie Hutchinson's casket. So that means at the funeral, Exelee was in the casket with Marjorie. So while they're mourning at the funeral, there's another body in there with Marjorie. That's so sick to me. That's so messed up. It's so twisted. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section. All right, guys, that's going to be it for today's story. If you're new to my channel, make sure you join the SBG family and subscribe, leave a like, and say hello in the comment section. I'll probably write you back. And if you're already subscribed, I want to say thank you, and I appreciate that. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. And as always, be safe, be good,